certificates of health and say, hey, you're good, you'll never be fined again. They just say, I didn't see anything. It's just like if you didn't get caught speeding to this training session, doesn't mean you weren't speeding. You can't just assume because you've been audited by OSHA and not fined that you're compliant. That's a false sense of security. And they will not say, well, we didn't catch it last year, but all right, our fault. If somebody got hurt. It's always the onus is on the business owner to comply with Lockout-Tagout. So in this case, we actually were brought in to create more procedures. There was more equipment in addition to the molding machines. There's things called temperature control units attached to the injection molders. Rooftop air handler units, so they forgot about their facility equipment. Overhead cranes, conveyors, case packers, pallet wrappers, and miscellaneous facility equipment like water pumps and exhaust fans. So in all, there was several pieces of equipment that did not have a lockout procedure. And does anybody know how much it costs maximum that OSHA can fine for just not having one procedure? $70,000 is their maximum fine for one procedure, and they can fine it on each procedure basis. A lot of money, right? A lot of potential exposure here before they had those procedures. And just because OSHA went through and didn't see anything doesn't mean they're compliant. So in this case, they had 23 multiple energy source machines. I like to show it visually how much they weren't compliant. And 92 multiple energy source machines were not compliant. So this was their liability, essentially. That's a good way to look at it, their exposure limit. So to fully comply and reduce risk of injury, we say every piece of equipment should have a lockout-tagout procedure, every piece of equipment that requires it. So why you want lockout-tagout, not why you need it. We started with why you need it for OSHA compliance. Why you want it. You can reduce the potential for injury or death. You can also reduce the potential for machine damage. The regulation wasn't written to protect your machines, but the lockout procedures certainly do. If you had a machine partially energized and didn't lock out all the sources properly and somebody restarted it, what's going to happen to your machine? Self-destruct, right? Very well could, especially an injection molding machine. Those things are $250,000 on up. If you had something locked out partially and somebody engaged it, it could just self-destruct, break a mold. Those are several $100,000. You could also utilize Lockout-Tagout, or the graphical format, to obtain advanced accreditation, VPPA, STAR status, Voluntary Protection Program Participants Association. That's that long acronym. SHARP, etc. There's a lot of advanced accreditations that help reduce insurance rates, help make you exempt from OSHA audits. If you're VPP STAR status, you're exempt from OSHA audits. They won't come on your site. Does that surprise anybody? That would be nice, wouldn't it? To know that you're compliant with VPPA, now OSHA's not going to come on site. They're partners with OSHA. They work with OSHA, so they know if you go VPP STAR status, you're above and beyond the regulation. You're above and beyond what OSHA says is minimum. They're not going to mess around with you. They're just going to look for the troublemakers out there. Save money on insurance rates. You could probably testify. If they're compliant with OSHA, if they've gone above and beyond, they can reduce their insurance exposure rates. Also, if you're reducing your claims, you can lower your workers' comp liability, etc. And also to boost morale. It means a lot to employees when you invest in above and beyond, or a graphical representation of how to do their job safely. So one more reason why you'd want that. We've heard before some misinterpretations where people might think Lockout-Tagout doesn't apply to our industry. We used to hear that from power generation. Now we're in 2 power plants right now. Lockout applies to every industry in the United States, and these are some examples. Manufacturing, chemical processing, mining, commercial facilities, and healthcare. I don't think OSHA goes to home-based businesses yet, but that's pretty much the only one that's exempt. Every industry, power generation, gas distribution, transportation, everything is under OSHA's rule. There might be some parallel regulations, like when you look at MSHA, mining, they have their own regulations, but they are deriven from Lockout-Tagout. They use Lockout-Tagout 1910.147 as a foundation for all the other parallel regulations. Anybody here struggling with NFPA 70E, compliance with arc flash? Lockout-Tagout's referenced there. It's not a new regulation. They referenced 1910.147. And what's the best way to prevent arc flash? Lock it out properly. Yeah, if you shut it down and locked it out properly, you're not going to have an arc flash problem. Arc flash happens when you don't do something properly or when something fails and an arc occurs, shut down under a load. Well, this is where we've heard it doesn't apply, but equivalent regulations do. Agriculture, maritime, gas distribution, and construction. So we say that it doesn't apply because the regulation itself might be superseded by something else that was based on it, the parallel regulations. Like NFPA 70E is not a regulation, but it's something that OSHA references to comply to. So nobody's, in the end, nobody's exempt. Just remember that. Which employees need to be Lockout-Tagout authorized? Any person who applies a lock where they would be injured if the machine was restarted. We have some industries that require, well, especially power generation, people to work under somebody else's lock control. And they're trying to get away from that because unless you have your physical lock and tag on that equipment, you're not under lock protection. You really should have your own lock and tag and have control of that key to maintain the intent of the regulation. So maintenance, operators, cleaning staff. We had one incident where we were asked, is this compliant? And they would shut down a press, have 20 or 30 contracted cleaners going around and scraping up the grease, wiping things down, and nobody's under lock protection. And it's not okay because that press could be started up. There has to be additional levels of protection to meet the intent then. So that's kind of that gray area. They might not be cited for it because they're doing a really good job at trying to meet the intent. They do have it de-energized, locked out, but every person there is not under lock protection. And if that machine was unexpectedly restarted and somebody was injured, who do you think suffers the liability there? Company owner, right?
If you had 20 people working on that, cleaning it, would all 20 have to lock that out? Is that what it should be?
Yes, they all have to be under lock protection. So have you ever seen, what's the maximum number you've seen anybody work on something? 6? Did they all have their 6 locks on that one isolation point? A lot easier way to do it, lockbox. Put one lock on the isolation point, put that key in here, and everybody who works on it puts their lock around here. A lot simpler, right? And that way when you have your contracted employees, they just apply their one lock here. They don't have to apply, if there was 6 isolation points on that machine, they don't have to have 6 locks, they have to have one. They put their one lock on here and they're under lock protection now. That's an easy way to do it then. A lot of solutions that help you achieve the same intent without having to have a string of 150 locks on your one energy source, probably breaking your energy source isolation point.
I have a question about this.
Yeah.
If you have one authorized person go around and lock the disconnects off and then put the keys in the lockbox, and then who's ever working on the machine, they don't have to be authorized or have knowledge of the procedure? Or
No, they don't. They need to be able to if they want to. And it needs to be available for them to check it if they can. They don't have to though. It just has to be locked out properly. That's the regulation's intent. As long as you can be assured it's locked out properly, then you're fine. But if your authorized employee missed a step and everybody's now putting their lock in the lockbox with a false sense of security and somebody gets hurt, now you're liable. It's not like OSHA says, well, that's a loophole. Sorry about that one. They would say, well, you didn't achieve the intent of the regulation, which was zero energy state and everybody under lock protection.
we have one disconnect that's in an electrical cabinet where, like, your average employee can't go in there to.
They're not authorized to get inside there. Right.
I mean, we take them with us, they can see that we locked it out, but they can't go in there to lock it out.
And that's
themselves.
equivalent level of protection then.
So if you take the unauthorized person around with you and they see that you're locking it out properly, then you're locking it after.
Right. Yep. The only thing is you're exposing yourself to one person's knowledge to do it correctly, and how many ever 5 or 6 other people working on that piece of equipment to trust that they did it correctly. If there's ever an accident, the company's liable. But if there's ever an accident because one person didn't lock it out properly, and you've got your procedures, you've done your training, you've got your corporate policy, and you've done your auditing, it's the person's fault now. It's that individual's fault. Even if they got hurt, killed in the machine, there could just be no citations from it. It was, well, you did everything you could. You gave them instruction, you provided procedures, you gave them locks and disconnects, they were lockable isolation points. They just failed to do it. You can't make them do it, but So what you're doing is meeting the intent, but if there was ever any gaps in how it was applied, then you're taking some onus on yourself rather than putting the burden on each person locking it out. The burden's going on the authorized employee that did it all, who is an employee of your company. And your company would be liable if he didn't do it correctly and somebody else got hurt. See what I'm saying? But you're compliant the way you're doing it.